This question comes from Under Solstice 93, otherwise known as Jake. Jake says, "Hi James, Steve and Pauline. I have a question relating to imposter syndrome. Do you come across this a lot in your clinical practice? Is it a complex manifesting itself, or is it due to a fragile ego? How might I overcome the feeling of being an imposter while I progress through a career and specifically at university?" And he follows up by saying, "Just to add further to my question above, with the feeling of being an imposter in relation to my work, to be more specific, I work in frontline healthcare and a mature student studying biomedical science at university." Good choices, by the way. "Be due to suppressed instincts. I ask this as I continue to grapple with the material already out there on the Discord and the YouTube channel, and I'm trying to make sense of all of the previous discussions. Sorry if this is a repeated question." Not at all, Jake. We've discussed imposter syndrome once or twice on the channel before, but usually just in passing. But I guess I will pass over to you, Pauline.
Well, I'm not so sure it exists, James, to be honest with you. I think it's almost been manufactured by the culture to simply describe maybe the way that somebody feels about themselves. I mean, I'd almost be more drawn to Adler's ideas, for example, of inferiority and superiority complexes and how they play out in people's lives. And, you know, I think it's probably a more helpful direction to come from as well, because people, for example, who have a superiority complex, they will compensate for that by behaving in an inferior way. So sometimes it's just that a person's not really living up to their genomic potential. And I think to think of it as being an imposter syndrome is such a negative suggestion, isn't it? And self-suggestion to make.
It is. I'm an imposter. And also I've got a syndrome as well, especially when you look into a syndrome, it's not a real thing insofar as it's like cause and effect. It's just a series of symptoms that just seem to manifest together.
That's right, a bit of a catch-all, isn't it?
Yeah, really? I've just looked it up on Google there for the the strict definition of this. Imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their accomplishments or talents and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And it's like, is that really what people mean when they feel they have imposter syndrome?
Well, that's a very good point, isn't it? I mean, sometimes people will feel and express that self-doubt, maybe through other complexes that are acting on them negatively. They could be parental complexes, internalized parental complexes. There could be a whole host of things. But I don't believe in and of itself it's a helpful way to think about things or to frame things. It may simply be that that it's been suggested to that person that they can't do X, Y and Z, or they're not particularly good at X, Y and Z, and actually another part of them doesn't really believe that, and then of course they become divided on the inside. They feel that split within themselves between the activity of the complexes, which are that the rhetoric of the complexes, if you like, and what they actually know to be true about themselves, and so they kind of fall down between two stools. But you know, it may simply be that person not living up to their genomic potential, or feeling almost embarrassed to do that. And if that's happening, that's really very sad, isn't it? Because
it is.
At the end of the day, that's what we should all be working towards, to be ourselves as completely as we can be.
Yeah.
So I worry about it. I mean, I've heard so many young, particularly young people, say it about themselves. But I think a lot of it is just it seems to have come out of the culture, and obviously it's grabbed a lot of young people's attention. And it's so easy to Google these things these days, and to see yourself in the material that you read. And I would just say, be very, very careful. And it's probably more likely, actually, that you're just not living up to your potential, and there are some negative complexes at work that are maybe trying to prevent you from doing that. But becoming conscious of that is probably enough of a start to be able to overcome them. So I personally would ditch it. I'd bin it. I don't think it's helpful at all.
Completely agree. I'm going to use a famous Steve quote from the channel. Go back to instincts.
Yes.
It's like if you feel you've got imposter syndrome, and you can do this on yourself relatively safely. It's like We've given the IPSA students actual like forms to do this, officially or formally. But anyone can do it. So what are your biopsychosocial parameters that are at work? And see which instincts of yours may be not being expressed or maybe suppressed. It's like I've worked with guys and girls actually who've signed up to the consultations here on Patreon, saying that they've got imposter syndrome. And it's like, I remember one girl I worked with, the issue was actually with her family. And a guy that I've worked with, or pretty much all the guys I've worked with it, are issues involving status. And of course, Jake, this has to be bespoke to yourself, so I wouldn't necessarily go looking in those places. But it goes to show that you present with a syndrome, which is like a CBT buzzword that you've read online.
Yes.
It's actually a completely different thing that goes back down into the instincts. And it's like, I guess that's one of our core things we talk about on the channel.
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely it is. Yeah, get back in touch with instincts, and everything else will correct for itself without a doubt. Yeah, but you have to try and work out for yourself in your own particular context what instincts might be, not being expressed properly or frustrated in some way. It's not a difficult thing to do, but I think it's a more productive thing to do than to simply give yourself such a nebulous label as well, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Like we said before, it's such a catch-all. I think you have to be very, very careful.
Yeah, agreed.